Takeout is cool, but delivery gets pricey. So, like a phoenix from the ashes, indoor dining is back at Forged Eatery. I use the analogy because the food is fire. It's a new approach to farm to table. No overalls, just dope food. Try my favorites, like the mushroom stew with pine nuts and ricotta, the cornmeal fried happy oysters, and the seared duck breast. Also, ask about the chocolate chip cookie tins. Mini chocolate chip cookies with a dusting of sea salt. Simply delicious. Head on over to forgedeatery.com to check out the current menu options and make a reservation today. Forged is located at 3520 Chestnut Avenue in Hamden. What's shaking, cats and kittens? I'm Rob Lee from Getting to the Truth in This Art. And this podcast is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Bazaar. Bazaar is a gift shop for those seeking the strange and unusual. Got morbid curiosity? Got an interest in natural history? Bazaar's got you covered. Bazaar specializes in antique medical equipment, jewelry, prints, funerary antiques, and many other morbid gifts. The inventory is ever-changing. I'm wearing a great death's head moth pin, and I'm enjoying this hand-poured candle called Overgrown Cemetery. It's great. It has the studio smelling awesome. Head on over to 3534 Chestnut Avenue in Baltimore, it's in that Hamden neighborhood, and see what they got to offer at Bazaar. Tell them Rob Lee sent you. Welcome to Getting to the Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and today's guest is a freelance illustrator from Baltimore who works a lot, never sleeps, and is a great son. In between drawing and not sleeping, teaches at the Baltimore Academy of Illustration. We have Alex Fine. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So, thank you. And I've been following your work. You got great work, and I dig it. But I would like to give you the opportunity to tell those who are not initiated more about your work and describe your work for the fine folks.
Definitely. So if you look at my work, just, with no understanding of illustration or basically what I do, you probably think of it looks like vintage comic book art from the 50s and 60s. And but essentially what I do for a living is I get hired by different magazines and newspapers. They send me an article or an essay, and then they'll expect me to communicate that writing visually. So whereas fine art, you do work kind of, for yourself or for a gallery, it hangs on a wall, people can enjoy it for different reasons. With illustration, it's very specific to communicating whoever the writer is trying to communicate, or it's hard to describe. I know it's like, if I go down to the bare essentials, it's basically the art of communication. But it could be about anything: politics. It could be fantasy, sci-fi. It could be basically any kind of piece of creative writing. The illustrator's job is basically to make a visual to go with it.
Got it. That is, to me, it's almost like a Rosetta Stone sort of thing, like changing from one medium to the other.
Definitely.
So now you have a unique style. You touched on kind of this 50s, this almost this, it's not pop art, but I see some of that in there as far as being an audience and looking at the work. Which type of art do you identify with most?
So it's kind of funny, as far as pop art goes, the first pop artist I ever got into was Roy Lichtenstein. And he was all about taking comic book panels and blowing them up as paintings. And the cool thing is there'd often be a message in one of the voice bubbles, the speech bubbles, Yeah. And what was cool about that was it was literally reading his artwork. And I think that translated to me because I always liked comic books, but I was just it's mixing art and a story, like a narrative. Mm-hmm. So that led me to get really into posters, for concerts, rock art. And artists like Frank Kozik and Coop and Alan Forbes were really big to me, mm-hmm. because it was taking a Lichtenstein and then putting a bunch of band names on it. And the fun thing about that was, if you knew anything about the bands that they were advertising, you also could kind of get a sense of what the artist was thinking when that artist associated the band with the art that they created. So I think even at almost 42 years old now, I really, really associate myself and relate to band art. posters and album covers, things like that. I mean, I love doing editorial work, like for newspapers and magazines, political stuff, entertainment stuff. But when it comes down to it, nothing is better than, band art for me. I love it. I still do it all the time, even when I'm not doing, my usually paid work, because band art usually doesn't pay that much. A lot of times it's pro bono because I love all the bands that I do work for.
We had this thing with my other podcast where we wanted to do all the live shows that we did in a given year. We wanted to have whatever our logo was for that particular year. So we try to swap it out every year. And on the back, just have each one of the live show dates and venues, almost like a band T-shirt. It was like, this is our tour for this particular year.
Yeah, no, that's like a really fun thing to do. I can't tell you how many times someone has contacted me to do like a wedding invite or like podcast show where they want me to create art that looks like a band poster, because it's just like, I think everyone loves the way it looks. It makes you feel like, you're doing something that's like a little outside the ordinary, because I mean, that's the thing about playing in bands. It's always been like, counterculture. You see more posters for bands that are playing small dive bars than you do for big arena shows, because, if you're Metallica or like Lady Gaga, or I'm trying to think of anyone famous.
That's a wide spectrum, by the way.
That's a very wide spectrum. I don't know why I went to Metallica first, but anyway, a lot of those acts, I think the posters are more as like a memorabilia piece than they are to advertise, because if Lady Gaga's coming to Baltimore, you don't need a poster to find that out.
Right.
that show's going to sell out. It doesn't matter. But the thing is, I think a lot of people at that point actually want a souvenir too. It's something that says like, I went to that. And I think that's why it's so popular with people who aren't in bands too, because it's sort of like, it almost like records that moment in history. It says like, this happened at this date with these people. And I think that's what I like about band art too. I look through my old files sometimes and I see posters from like the 90s that I illustrated. And I'm just like, wow, that was like, I think about who I was back then and like where I was as an artist. I could see where I was as an artist, which is really scary too, because my drawing style, let's say it's evolved over the years a little bit, but it's sort of like getting tattoos. It's like a stroll down memory lane when you look at stuff like that.
Yeah. The band shirt, the tour shirt, that kind of merch style of art, that's turned into its own thing where people are using the old, I remember like Baltimore Arena or the now Royal Farms. I remember it was maybe it was a tour that had DMX in it. And my mom, she grabbed shirts for my brother and I, and it was just that really, you know the type of shirt I'm describing. It's just the person that is kind of like a little faded out, and and that's come back, and it's like, you're buying these shirts for $50 because of the design, and Urban Outfitters are throwing it out there. So this kind of timeless nature of one's art and kind of looking at it, nostalgia sells ultimately. And I think, looking back at as I was touching on earlier, that 50s, that pop art kind of vibe, that's an element I think that's in your art that makes it like almost timeless in some ways.
Yeah, and it's something I always was drawn to, that kind of like vintage, sort of like the art that you would see in advertisements in the 50s and 60s and in the comic books. And it's funny, sometimes you can find yourself looking like you're copying that style too. So you have to be careful to kind of put your own modern twist on it a little bit. So for me, it's like, when I first got out of art school, I was definitely biting the styles of a lot of my favorite artists. I mean, it's really hard not to before you really find your voice. And I think I always tell the students that I teach nowadays who are kind of stressed out about finding styles, I'm like, right now, unless you're doing a job for a client, it's a good time to just experiment, copy someone else's style, copy 100 people's styles. And eventually that repetition of getting inside the head of different artists sometimes mashes into one unified, hybrid of all of those styles. And then you end up with something that's like uniquely yours, because maybe only you're the one who put together all those puzzle pieces. But it's just like, when you look at like 50s art, when I say like my work is inspired by it, there was a time when my work just looked straight up like it was from like Spider-Man 1965. But now I've been influenced influenced, I'll be honest, I've been influenced by so many young artists with like so many more like, relevant modern styles that kind of like, it's almost like there's no choice but to have that filter into your own work, because you can't help but read magazines and newspapers that are out today when you see all these new artists. And you might say like, hey, that texture is really cool. I might try that in my work just to see how it looks. But when you combine all of these different elements with your existing style too, you find yourself evolving over the years. And I think that's like one of my favorite things about being an illustrator is not stagnating, but just always evolving into something else.
Evolution is important. And the thing that you touched on that I think resonates across the board, because I see it working for my stuff. Like I can go back and look at, I will listen to podcasts from 2009 when I got started, and it's like, wow, I was listening to a lot of this particular podcast, and I kind of started taking elements from here, elements from there. And I was like, literally, this is a ripoff. This is, fully, this is a ripoff. And being able to, I think, take those things and almost Bruce Lee it, like this, my style is to have no style. And, but also that isn't in itself, you're making your thing, you're presenting it in a certain way. So like only I can do my thing. So it's kind of this cyclical thing, this back and forth. Yeah,
definitely. I spent so many years as a younger illustrator worrying about the people who I was influenced by, if they ever saw my work, if they'd be upset at me. And so now that I'm in my early 40s, I will say that if I find someone's following my Instagram and their work is starting to look eerily familiar, I'm very patient with young artists right now when it comes to this kind of stuff, because I remember what it was like. There was a time when I had folders on my desktop on my computer that was just like each artist and specific illustrations that I was just like really inspired by. Yeah. And I hope that, I have to say that also I wasn't the most talented artist. So, for me, it's like, even if I was trying to rip someone off, I was probably unsuccessful anyway. It's like, oh, it's really trying to bite this style, but instead it just looks like some crappy illustration,
Right.
But the thing is, there are a lot of illustrators out there, young illustrators, who are really good at imitation. And, unless they're just straight up copying someone, like I'm pretty understanding what young artists are going through, because especially nowadays, there's so much of a hustle to get your work seen by an art director and to get contacted back. And, the rates are going down and down compared to the cost of living. Mm-hmm. And so I can't blame a young artist for doing what they can to just get seen, and figuring out your style on top of trying to make a living can be really stressful. I mean, like I said, though, all that said, I'm not telling anyone to rip off anyone either, because, a style is pretty sacred. You want to hold on to your style, but at some point it's hard not to be derivative in the art world, because you're just bombarded with visuals constantly, and it's hard not to be inspired.
Is that similar to like comedians in that it's like, you ripped off my joke?
Yeah. So I would say that ripping off a joke in illustration would be like taking someone's concept, because I think concept is almost more important than style, because, style is a really hard thing to I don't know. It's hard to have a totally unique style, because I can't tell you one illustrator who just came up with their style on their own without looking at other artists first. Everyone's influenced by someone, but a concept, a unique thought, that's worth its weight in gold in illustration. If you come up with a really clever idea and then you see someone else use it like a few weeks later for a different magazine, you get really upset, because when you think of that idea, it's like you have this epiphany. It's like the clouds part and light shines down on you, and then to see someone else take it, it feels pretty bad. But also, it's always worth a dialogue first, though, before you get mad and you take to Facebook and Twitter or Instagram and say this person's like a thief and all that. I think it's always good to contact the artist and to find out if it was just like a coincidence, because that happens too. Sometimes there's only so many solutions to a problem, and sometimes great minds think alike, and you just happen to come upon it at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So speak on, if you will. So I'll put it this way. I watched recently, Goodfellas, and rewatched Goodfellas for a podcast research, and there's this one scene where towards the end of the movie where they're trafficking. Well, the babysitter's trafficking the drugs or what have you, and she was like, "I need my special hat. I won't fly without my special hat." So, for you to get into your creative mindset, and what is your special hat? What is that thing that you need?
That's a good question. My special hat, I think a TV. I can't do work without the TV on. I need something. I need some noise. And, I've tried audiobooks. I've tried Spotify playlists, all that. Yeah. I just need some really stupid TV in the background. Just some show that I've seen a million times, like Bob's Burgers or like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something. I just need something that I watched so much over the years that I can have it on the background. I can visualize it in my head while I'm working, but kind of just know it's there. Yeah. If I don't have a TV, there's times where I'm traveling and I have to work on the road and I'm in a hotel room. And if that hotel doesn't have some way for me to hook up some kind of like Roku or some kind of device where I can listen to, my stories, then I won't be able to be productive. I need something on the background while I work, or I just end up just getting lost in my own head and nothing gets done. I think it's the ADHD in me. I'll start thinking of a million different things, but if I have background noise and my drawing tablet in front of me, I can get a lot of work done. I can work for like 15 hours straight if I have that combination. Yeah.
That's kind of what I need to sleep, actually. Like,
same here. Yeah.
I've gotten to that spot where my partner, she put me on to watching Columbo. And I'll see how Peter Falk's hair has changed over the decades. And I'm like, this guy did it. This is how he did it.
Yeah, the hair changes, but the trench coat stays the same.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's a philosophy for my life, actually.
Definitely.
So yeah, that's what I need to sleep, or some anime that I've seen, or even now because of Peacock, I'll go back and watch like old like Attitude Era WWE, and somehow I can fall asleep to like simulated violence. It's really interesting.
Yeah, but there's no shame in that. I have to say, we all have our shows. Peacock, I got really scared when The Office left Netflix. I was like, what am I going to do? Because I saw this article that describes people with anxiety disorder. Mm-hmm. They like to watch the same shows over and over again because it sort of like creates a safe place for them. Yeah. Like it's just like constant, it's something that you can control, So that made so much sense because whenever I'm not feeling well, I put on The Office, and that's like, that kind of brings me back to home base. And so when I found out the Peacock was going to be running it, I was like, well, that makes sense now. It's an NBC show. They probably took it off Netflix so they could have it for themselves on Peacock. But I have to say, I still watch The Office every night to go to bed. I set on my sleep timer on my TV because my wife hates the TV being on. She like can't sleep with it on. So we have a compromise. We'll be like, if I can't fall asleep in the next like half hour, then it's on me. I'll just put it on my phone and put it under my pillow and listen to it maybe. Because, you have to have your routines, right? Especially people with anxiety, you have to have that constant, that regular routine that keeps you centered, I guess. So for me, it's The Office or Bob's Burgers every night to fall asleep.
I dig it. Hell yeah. Let's see. So you spoke about young artists, and real quick, speak on maybe fostering creativity from the standpoint of, do you think it's something that someone is born with, or do you think creativity is generally cultivated as something that is, you may not have it when you start off with, but is something that you can be great.
Definitely. Well, I've had this discussion with my students a lot over the years because a lot of what I would teach would involve coming up with concepts, brainstorming ideas. And a lot of students, if they're not used to sort of a process for creating concepts, it can be really stressful, because the more stressed out you get, the harder it is to think. We touched on anxiety earlier. For me, the more anxious I am, the less I can think straight. I think of a million things at once, and that can really hurt the creative, process for coming up with ideas. So what I tell people is, there's people, of course, who are born with a higher level of creative thinking than other people. You know, some people are good at math, some people are good at writing, creatively. Some people are better at, a whole number of different things. So, there's different kinds of intelligence. And of course, there's some people who are born with a higher level of creative thinking, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn how to think more creatively either. It's just like anything else. If you have to find the process that works best for you. And one thing I would work with my students was finding out how they work best, because, there were times where I had my students working with art directors, like from like Newsweek or The Atlantic or Washington Post. And some of those deadlines are really quick. Like I think one Newsweek job I had my students work on was like a 2-day turnaround. So obviously they can't contact the art director at like midnight to kind of brainstorm an idea. So I said, look, this is not what I usually do, but here's my cell number. I will answer calls off business hours. Usually my quote unquote office hours as a teacher would be like 9 to 5, but sometimes I'd be like, okay, if we're working on this tight deadline and you need to just talk out an idea to kind of flesh things out, feel free to call me until like midnight, because after that, that's pretty much my breaking point. I can't stay up after that. But it's like, if you need to just talk out some ideas, because I want to make sure that, every student has the ability to figure out what their process is, because once you crack that code, then it becomes so much easier to think of ideas in the future. For me personally, like my creative process involves thinking of symbolism, thinking of different things that I could attach to a concept or a narrative. Like an example was there was after Trump had that meeting with Kim Jong-un I think they met at the DMZ maybe, or I forget exactly where the meeting place was, but people were saying that they were rolling out the red carpet for Kim Jong-un. Yeah. And, as an illustrator, I wasn't trying to politicize my feelings about that. I have a lot I can say about Trump, trust me. But I was just trying to figure out, okay, how do I illustrate rolling out the red carpet for Kim Jong-un? So I thought, okay, it's about the United States and their diplomatic relations. So I thought, okay, United States, the U.S. flag is the symbol I most associate with this country. Yeah. So I figured, okay, what on the flag can I use to create like another object to kind of like turn it around to make it something else? Yeah. So I thought, okay, well, the red stripe looks like a red carpet. Right. So what I did was I just tilted the flag to make it look like it's the floor. And I had one of the stripes rolling out, like sort of like mid-roll with Kim Jong-un standing in front of it. Because I was like, okay, now I can take one thing and change the whole meaning of it to mean something else. So I think that's kind of how my creative process works.
Let's see. Let's speak on accomplishments real quick.
Sure.
You've got a great client list, obviously. Been doing your thing, and you have your background in music, obviously, and in education. So, what would you say your biggest accomplishment in any of those fields would be?
Well, I guess I could start with illustration. I feel like my biggest accomplishment was probably getting my first assignment. That to me was like the turning point for everything. I was actually still a student at MICA at the time, an illustration major, and I had an art show at the Auto Bar. And the art director, Joe McLeod from City Paper, was there shooting pool with his now wife, Wendy. And my band was playing that night too. And after we played, he just came up to talk to me about my band. But then I was like, I'm actually, just here playing my art opening. If you want to check out my art, it's on the wall too. I didn't know he was an art director. So he's like, oh, let's walk over there. Tell me about it. So I started talking about it was mostly, rock posters. It's all Auto Bar show posters. Because that was actually my senior thesis at MICA. And he's like, well, this is like, really cool. This is like, I think he mentioned pop art at the time. It kind of reminded him of that kind of comic book style. So I said, yeah, I don't know. Like, I just, I'm about to graduate as an illustrator, but I don't know if I could really even call myself an illustrator because I just do art for bands. So he's like, fuck that. That's illustration. That's like, what you're drawing, it's like, you're telling a story in your art. That's illustration. So he's like, if you're up for it, we have a cover assignment coming up for the holiday guide. And I remember the year before they had Shepard Fairey do the cover. And this is before the Obama Hope poster. And there's a lot of other things I could go on about Shepard Fairey. I mean, I won't go into that. But the thing is, I was, he was like an artist who I'd been seeing for years. And I thought, to follow those footsteps, I don't know, it kind of scared me. But Joe was awesome, really patient with me. And then we developed a really great working relationship, invited him to my wedding. I played guitar at his wedding. And he's like one of my favorite art directors I've ever worked with. And I just really value the patience he had with me as a young illustrator, because looking at some of those illustrations, I was definitely still learning as I was going, Yeah. But he was great. Another accomplishment, though, I have to say, I feel bad if I went through this without mentioning, my rep agency, when they signed me, it's the best group of people, Katarina Jad and Christina Snyder. Mm-hmm. It's Snyder, New York, based in New York. When they first contacted me, I wasn't sure about signing with a rep agency, but that turned out to be one of my favorite, decisions of my life, because they've been the most supportive group of people, and I feel like they're an extension of me. They always treat clients really well. And if it wasn't for them, there's so many awesome jobs I would never have gotten, I don't think. So that was like a big turning point, I think, in my career.
Fantastic. That was fantastic. I'm actually going to look them up too. So I have a few more questions. Sure. Let's see. One is going to be 90s television. You touched on Buffy, so I'm going to need two more from you, two more guilty pleasure 90s TV shows. And so if you're going to hit me off with those real quick.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start by saying this. There is no guilty pleasure for me because I have no shame in how awful my taste in TV is. There's no such thing as guilt. But Buffy, I guess if I'm judging on the standards of society, then I will say that I should feel guilty about this, maybe. But I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I started watching it when I had mono in 2002, and I couldn't get off the couch. So one of the only channels that came in was FX. So I just watched Buffy all day, every day. And I just I love that show so much. It's just so goofy at times. But I think her character was just amazing. I loved Buffy, and I'll add Angel as a sort of offshoot. I'll combine them into one show, I guess.
That universe.
That whole universe, I've heard some pretty terrible things about Joss Whedon, though, too. So I definitely don't support him, but I will support, those shows, because the shows were awesome. Also, my wife gives me crap about this all the time, but every now and then I'll just start watching Dawson's Creek. It is the worst show ever. And I acknowledge that's the worst show. But that's almost why I like to watch it, because it's just so stupid. And even James Van Der Beek admits how bad that show was. One of the shows I love is this show called Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23. Yeah. It's by Kristen Ritter. James Van Der Beek plays himself on the show and is always making fun of himself for Dawson's Creek. So I feel like that's okay. And another show that every couple of years I watch the whole show in its entirety is Family Matters. I fucking love Family Matters. Even when Steve Urkel was cloning himself and going into space and all that stuff, I love them all, every single episode. I mean, it's that's a show where, how on The Simpsons, Homer got dumber and dumber as the show went on? Yeah. I feel like with Family Matters, it just got more and more just bonkers as time went on. It's just between cloning himself, and then I think Carl at one point got the DNA of Bruce Lee so he could fight a group of criminals. Yeah. It's just weird. I mean, and there's some stuff that definitely hasn't aged well. I mean, 90s shows definitely, there's some episodes where okay, they need to be called out for that episode or this episode. Yeah. But it's just some of those episodes, it's like we were talking about earlier, they're just kind of comforting too, because those were the shows I watched when I was in high school and wasn't going on dates. And I was just staying at home watching TGIF on TV, and it brings back some good and bad memories, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the that comforting television, for me, it was a period where I was just in the crib, solo dolo, unemployed. And I was and nothing on my walls. Right. And I started doing this painting thing, but I had nothing on my walls. So I was like, this is almost a padded cell in some respects. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to watch like Disney Channel. And I fell in love with the whole setup. I was like, this is calming. This is chill. Sweet life, Zach and Cody. Let's go. Let's get it.
Totally. I mean, yeah, it's the kind of stuff that you're like, okay, I can't relate to this at all, but it's just like, you know what you're going to get with it. You know, there was a time when I think it's around 2000, I was living by myself in this little apartment in Silver Spring. And this is, you know, I had no cable. You couldn't stream stuff on the internet back then. Yeah. So I had a VCR, and I used to work at Tower Records, and they used to give me free promo videos. Yeah. So this is my video collection at the time. I had She's All That. I had American Pie, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. And let's see, what else was one of the ones I used to watch a lot too? Let's see.
Good Vanderbeek in that one, by the way.
What's that? What's that?
Good Vanderbeek in that one, by the way.
Oh yeah, Vanderbeek was in that one too, playing himself again. Yeah. Oh man, and the other one, I can't remember the name of this movie. I should remember this. Chris Klein played, and he played a guy who fell in love with Heather Graham, and it turns out they thought they were brother and sister, but apparently, spoiler alert, they weren't, I guess. But I had that on video too. I think I had a crush on Heather Graham.
Say It Isn't So. Boom.
Say It Isn't So. You're right. Yeah, that's it. And that movie was pretty terrible, objectively terrible. But I watched it so much because it's all I had. Yeah. Because one thing about me is, like, when I was a little kid, I had terrible insomnia. Like from the time I was like 8 years old till I was about 24, I would just stay up all night. And I don't know how I functioned the next day, but I just could never sleep. Yeah. So when I was a kid, I used to watch the Home Shopping Network because it was the only thing that was on at like 3 a.m. Yeah. But when I got a VCR, I was like, wow, this is a game changer. Now I can watch terrible movies all night, every night. So I think I watched those movies on repeat. Like if I watched She's All That today, I could quote every single line just because I just watched it so many times, and I didn't even like the movie, but I just had it. So I guess that would be like a guilty 90s movie pleasure, maybe. I don't know, but yeah. And also Rachel Lee Cook, she was in Dawson's Creek.
See, it's just full circle there.
It is. It all comes around. Yeah.
Because like definitely the TGI Friday. I remember every now and again on the other pod we would do this nostalgic thing, and we just found ourselves singing the theme from Perfect Strangers. Because it was just
I watched that show so much when I was a kid. Like, oh man, that and what was it? There was even. Do you remember a show like? Well, do you remember the old Fox lineup when it first started too? Like 21 Jump Street. And, there was a show with Joy Louise-Dreyfus, and I forget what it was about. It was called Duets. And I just remember her. I don't remember anything else. But yeah, that was the days of like Married with Children, the Gary Shandling show. But I have to say, a guilty 80s pleasure is definitely 21 Jump Street, though. I have watched that show on repeat. In fact, one of my former interns, who was an amazing artist, her name's Kirsty Hamburg. Everyone should always check out her art because it's amazing. But there was one year where we were working together during the summer. She was a former student of mine. And I feel so bad because I just had 21 Jump Street on all the time. And I really hope she didn't like totally hate it. But I couldn't stop watching. It was like one of those shows I just like needed in the background while I worked. Yeah. And I have to admit, I still watch it. The storylines are ridiculous, of course, but you know, there's some stuff on that show that holds up today, though. I mean, I think some of those 80s shows, I think, you know, there's some shows that don't touch on those subjects nowadays that maybe they should. I mean, they were talking about things back then that were like pretty modern in terms of issues, you know, social issues.
Absolutely. And, you know, like I was saying about Columbo earlier, I was like watching it. I was like, this is a PG rated show. He's like, it was this one episode that was the second appearance. Cause the bit that my girlfriend and I do is, like which villain? We always go by what villain, and it's like it's the second episode that has George Hamilton in it, and it's just like, yeah, you were in that Skin flick. I was like, what?
Oh man. Well, you know, sometimes even Bob's Burgers will say things. I'm just like, well, this is definitely not a kid's cartoon, you know. But yeah, it's like, you know, there's shows that I'll just watch from the first season till the last season. Yeah. I do that a lot. I always have to have some show I'm always just watching the whole series. And sometimes I'll be like, wow, this was a long time ago, but they're still talking about things that mean a lot today, you know? And sometimes it makes me sad because it shows you how little things have changed too, you know? Like, I mean, there's storylines that are just like, wow, that's what we're still talking about this after like 30 years or more than 30 years, you know? And it makes you feel like that, you know, maybe society doesn't move as fast as we would like it to, but yeah.
So the last question I have, and this is the almost the de facto Baltimore question. So if you're having someone visit, as we're opening up, you have someone visit, we're giving out itineraries. Yep. You're having someone visit Baltimore for a long weekend. We have one coming up while we're recording this. Where would you tell them to check out? You know, maybe a food place, maybe a place for some culture, music, something like that. Yeah. Where would you tell them to check out and why?
Oh man, this could be a long answer. Let me warn you, because I think it all depends on who the person is. You know, I definitely would want to get a sense of like what they enjoy. But if it was someone who has like similar interests to me, I would definitely say like for food, there's so many good places in Hamden. You know, I'd say if you're vegan, you know, you could go to Golden West. They have a lot of good options. Or one cafe. For my favorite place in Hamden is Grano, the pasta bar. Yeah. Sometimes I just want a simple bowl of pasta because their sauces are amazing. So I'd say, or Food Market. There's some really good like sandwiches there. They have something called the Fast Food Market on the weekends where they do their version of fast food, which is pretty amazing. For art museums, you know, you can't go wrong with like the Walters and BMA, but also the American Visionary Museum. That place is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you'll see stuff there that you won't see anywhere else, and and a lot of like uniquely Baltimore things to see too. Let's see. For music, definitely go to the Auto Bar. They're opening up again soon. There's always a good show there every night or a DJ night. My favorite place is to play music is the Sidebar, though. That's been my spot for like, man, how many years? I've been playing there since 2004, I think, or even before 2004, honestly, since maybe 2003. And I love the Sidebar. One night, my wife and I went to see the Dandy Warhols at Ram's Head. And afterwards, they were signing posters that I made for them for their album. And they're like, what are we doing next? I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. So I took them to the Sidebar and we all just like hung out at the Sidebar and they were like dancing on the bar. And it was just like a really awesome, just Baltimore night.
That's cool.
Also books, Atomic Books, of course. I tell someone if you want some comics or you want some like graphic novels or anything else, you can go to Atomic. They have a bar in the back. Hopefully they'll be opening soon, you know, after the pandemic. And yeah, their bar is called the 8 Bar. It's awesome. You get to talk to the owners about anything. And it's just a really great place. They have like nights where they invite authors to come speak too. So that would be like, in a nutshell, like kind of Baltimore synopsis, but there's a lot of stuff I'm sure I'm missing too.
I mean, you're hitting the key points. That's very similar to what I tend to do. I recall not too long ago when things were still open, just hanging out in Atomic and when the back bar was still open and just having something from Stillwater Artisanal. It was this tangerine beer and we were just shooting the shit with the person back there and we were there for probably 2 hours and I was like, this is great. And I was like, we just literally did nothing, but it was a very chill and great experience.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I look for those things. I think for one's itinerary, you're coming here, just come here and do nothing.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I'm always bummed out when some of my friends come to visit and they can't stay for very long because I'm like, there's so much I want to show you. Like another one of my favorite art directors ever is my art director at Newsweek, Michael Gosel. Like him and his partners come to visit sometimes, but usually coming through town. And it sucks because they're never here for very long. I'm like, you've got to visit for like a week. Let's just like do fun things for like a week, go to a million different places. But we usually can only just end up getting food. But next time, no, I've got some stuff planned for the next like longer stay for like him and a bunch of my other friends who are going to be visiting shortly when the pandemic is over.
Absolutely.
I cannot wait to see friends again so I can take them to all my favorite places in the city.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be great because I got a lot. My social calendar has been filling up because people I've been doing and connecting with through this podcast are like, when are we hanging out? I was like, soon.
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you so much. Shameless plug time.
Oh, yeah.
So your social media, website, all of that good stuff. And I actually was on your Snyder page, and I'm seeing the Migos work is fire, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was for Atlanta Magazine. That whole package was so much fun. Social media is. I can't even tell you what my Facebook is. If you just search Alex Fine, there's not many of us on Facebook. Actually, I might be getting rid of my Facebook and my Twitter soon, but I might just have Instagram and that's it. But my Instagram is just at Alex Fine Illos. That's ILLOS. And that's the same for my Twitter. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much the best way to find me. Also, if you go to SnyderNewYork.com, you'll see my portfolio page and a ton of other amazing artists on there. And also thanks for listening to my rambling. Sometimes being cooped up for it feels like 20 years since this all started. Like whenever I get to talk to somebody, I just talk about a minute. And I used to try to play it cool when I do podcasts or interviews. Now I'm just like, whatever, I'm just going to nerd out about whatever it is I'm talking about. So thanks for indulging my spazziness, or I don't know what the right term for it is.
No, you were great. This has been a lot of fun. So I'll do my sign off. And again, thank you for coming onto the podcast. So
thank you.
For Alex Fine, I'm Rob Lee saying that there's art in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.